Okay, all right, here we go. All right, good morning, dear delegates. Yep, welcome to COTI 2021 PhD ECR Workshop. Good morning, yes. My name is Edmund from Edith Cowan University, Australia. And together with the PhD Workshop Committee, we will be facilitating today's workshop. So before we begin the session, the chair of COTI, Professor Kirsten Holmes, would like to welcome you. Unfortunately, due to the lockdown in Western Australia, she will not be able to join us live in person. And she has prepared a short video recording to welcome you. So please enjoy it.
Hello, Kaya and Kia ora. I'm Kirsten Holmes, Chair of COTI, currently in lockdown in Perth, Australia, and I welcome you to our first ever online PhD and ECR workshop at COTI 2021. Welcome to both COTI regulars and first-time attendees. COTI is known for its friendly and supportive collegiate atmosphere, and I hope you will derive enormous benefit from today's programme. When we realised that we would need to move COTI 2021 online because of the COVID restrictions, it was a priority that we continue to offer our PhD and ECR workshop, which is traditionally the very first event of our annual conference. The pandemic has hit universities in Australia, New Zealand and globally particularly hard, and we were determined that COTI would still be able to support our new and emerging scholars. I am delighted that our team have been able to create an excellent programme. Thank you to everyone involved, and I particularly want to thank Dr. Ina Reichenberger, Dr. Edmund Go and Mardis Modani. Mardis is our PhD student representative and has worked tirelessly with Ina to deliver the Wednesday HDR workshops during 2020, as well as the joint SMANS, ANZELS and COTI HDR event last December. I hope you enjoy the programme today, whether it's in your morning, afternoon, or at some other less sociable time, and I look forward to seeing you at the conference sessions next week.
All right, so a big thanks to Professor Holmes for the welcome video. Yeah, so we trust that you are safe and well, we hope. Yep, we live in unprecedented times, and as cliche as it sounds, but we are in this together. So thank you very much for your immense support to COTI. Yep, today we have a record number of more than 80 delegates registered for this workshop from all over the world. Yep, it is really heartening to see this. And it is great to see so many familiar PhD and ECR scholars online. Yeah. For those attending COTI for the very first time, yep, thank you for being with us on this lovely Friday. Yep. We know doing a PhD is tough, and finding a job is tougher, and being an ECR is even tougher. Yep. But it is rewarding and doable, as we will find out. Yep. Therefore, we have prepared an exciting program lined up for you today. Yep. As you can see, our first session features a panel session of 6 esteemed academics on the topic Back to Basics and how to get the most out of your PhD and ECR. And this is followed by the breakout mentoring workshop with senior academics, where you get to pick their brains about academic affairs and career advice. And lastly, we'll close it off. After all the academic stimulus, our final session is a well-deserved mindfulness e-workshop facilitated by the mindfulness guru, Peter Bliss, who will take us on a journey of happiness, I hope. Yeah, all right. So as you can see, we have a very exciting lineup. All right, so without further ado, let's begin our panel session, Back to Basics and how to get the most out of your PhD. Yeah. And as you can see, this panel will focus on the role of 3 significant components of academic life, which has research, teaching, and service, and how we can actually use this to enhance the PhD and ECR experience. The panel will help the PhD and ECR scholars to obtain a better understanding of the value of a PhD, how to increase skills in publishing and teaching for better career prospects, and of course, the implications of COVID-19 on the PhD and ECR students. So I will now introduce the panel members. Yep. And we will then be followed by our questions for today. And of course, throughout the presentation, yep, if you have any questions that you would like to ask our panelists, right, please feel free to post your questions on the Event Air portal. Yep. So as we approach the end of the session, I'll be looking at this Events Air portal to actually get some of your questions to ask the panelists. Yeah. So please allow me to introduce our first panelist, Professor Sarah Donecker. Yep, she is a research expert. You can see her waving in the background. She's one of our senior academics and a fellow of CORTI. She's a professor of tourism at the University of Queensland. Yep, expert in segmentation methods, measurement in social science, Airbnb, and environmental behaviors. Sarah has won more than 30 research awards. Yep, as you can see, 16 Australian Research Council grants, including the ARC Laureate Fellowship. And she has published more than 300 research articles with a H index of 70 and more than 16,000 citations. Yeah, very, very impressive. Yeah. And our second panelist that we have is one of our ECRs, Dr. Jun Wen, who will be talking about research experts. And he's a lecturer in tourism at Edith Cowan University. Yep, he completed his PhD in 2018 at University of Waikato. And his research actually focuses on special interest tourism and deviant behavior, very similar to me. Yep. And his research is very much driven by personal observations, yep, and his own experience. Yep, very impressive. Last year in 2020, June Wen actually received the Australia's top 40 young researcher, yep, by the Australian newspaper. So very impressive from our second panelist. And our third panelist, focusing on the teaching perspective, our senior academic, Professor Karen Smith. Yeah. And Professor Karen Smith is Professor of Tourism Management at the University of Wellington in New Zealand. She is currently the Associate Dean of Learning and Teaching, and she is the member of the New Zealand Order, yep, of Merit. Yep. She is an expert in event volunteering research and has received Teaching Excellence Awards at the university level. She has published more than 100 articles with a H index of 27 and more than 2,500 citations. So very impressive track record there. Yeah. And our fourth panelist is Dr. Sean Lee. He'll be talking about teaching perspective from an ECR point of view. And Dr. Sean is a senior lecturer in marketing, tourism, and hospitality at Curtin University. Yep, he completed his PhD in 2016 at Curtin Uni. And he lives a very stressful life, and therefore he manages his stress by cycling and swimming. Yeah, he's an expert in tourism marketing research, and he is a recipient of a number of teaching awards by Unibank in 2017 and 2018. Yeah, a very teaching focused sort of person. Yeah, and then next we have Professor Erica Wilson, who will be talking about the service perspective as a senior academic. Professor Erica Wilson is Professor of Tourism at Southern Cross University. She is currently the Pro Vice Chancellor, Academic Innovation. Yep. Professor Wilson completed a PhD in 2004 at Griffith Uni. Yep. She's an expert in women's travel research. Yep. And has published more than 80 research articles with a H index of 29 and has more than 2,700 citations. Very impressive and a very busy woman as well. Yeah. And last we have Isabel Ye, and she's an ECR at University of Queensland. Yeah, she's a lecturer in tourism. Uh, she has completed her PhD recently in 2021. Yep, at University of Queensland. She's very active and heavily involved in service roles such as the HDR committee, the COTI PhD student representation. Yep. She's an expert in visitor experience research. And recently, she was the recipient of the UQ Future Leaders Award in 2020. Yep. So once again, on behalf of COTI, we thank you. We have a very busy schedule, so thank you for joining us and presenting to our delegates. All right, so I'm sure you guys have been waiting for this. Yes. So we have two questions prepared for all of you guys today. And these questions were actually, we actually took all your responses on SurveyMonkey. Yep. And we actually put them into two questions, broad questions, such that it actually address most of your comments and your questions. So we're going to start off the first discussion question today, where we will hear from our ECRs experts. So most of the ECRs actually completed their PhD between 2016 to 2021. Yep. And they'll be talking about and addressing this question about how can research / teaching and service further develop the PhD and ECR experience. Yep. So I'll pass it on to them now. So each of them will be introducing themselves, and they will be attempting to actually address and answer this discussion question. So without further ado, our first panel speaker today is Dr. Jun Wen. So Jun, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Edmund. Okay, thank you, everyone. I think it's it's my great pleasure to join this workshop as an ECR and to share a little bit about my research at a very junior level. So a little bit about myself. I'm currently a researcher and a lecturer in tourism and hospitality management at the School of Business and Law from Edith Cowan University, Australia. I recently finished my PhD in 2018 from the University of Waikato in New Zealand. So in the past couple of years, I gradually identified my research identity based on my personal working experience, my daily life, and especially based on my traveling experience in the different parts of the world. So I think that's quite important. I describe myself as I firmly believe that interest is my best teacher because I treat academic research and writing as parts of my daily life. So very interesting. So recently, one of my colleagues asked me, so your daughter is only 1 year old. How can you find a lot of time to write up your papers and conduct your research? So my answer is, so I normally, when I writing in my study room, that's the best way for me to relax. So writing now becoming very important part in my life. So in the past couple of years, I gradually have my four major streams in terms of my research. The first one, as Edmund introduced, is special interest tourism. So the one typical example is drug tourism. So in 2014, when I traveled to Amsterdam, the Netherlands, I observed some of the tourists, especially from the Asian countries I can see. They step into the coffee shop and consume the cannabis. That time, this phenomenon shocked me a lot because I'm Chinese. I was born in China. I was educated that we cannot touch cannabis, all kinds of drugs, because it's illegal. We cannot do that. So I asked myself, what is going on? What's wrong with this world? So I decided to do some research to find it out. So that's why I had my first publication in my career about drug tourism. So my second research stream is social issues in tourism and hospitality. I recently did some research about human trafficking, sex trafficking, and the racial discrimination in the context of tourism and hospitality, because I think that's a very meaningful topics. It should be addressed in the literature. And the third one is the Chinese outbound tourism market and the tourist behavior. This is a very broad area. I'm myself as a Chinese. I think I kind of understand the Chinese culture and their behavior. So that's why I want to contribute a little bit in this area. The last one is interdisciplinary research focusing on mental health, public health, and in the context of tourism and hospitality. So for me, I like working as a team member, and learn from the experts and the colleagues from the different disciplines. So we all contribute to one study from the different perspective. I really enjoy the process. So this is a little bit about my current research efforts. So I want to also share something about my PhD. I started my PhD in 2014. At the beginning, to be very, very honest, I lost myself. I really have no idea why I did a PhD and how to do good research, because a PhD is very high level. At the beginning, I just swim in the literature and try to find something to help me to establish my research idea, but it's too broad and it's really hard to find a way to understand where my destination is. And as a typical Chinese student, I was educated to listen to my supervisor and listen and do it. But my supervisor tried to change my thinking patterns and behavior. You do it because it's your PhD, not mine. So the first year, I learned a lot. I tried to change my mind and to take the ownership of conducting research belongs to me. So I did it. So that's really, really important. The first thing and a very important thing I learned from my PhD journey. And in 2015, I started to realize maybe apart from my PhD research, I probably have the capacity to do something else, which is really attract my attention. So this is animals, because I like animals. I have dogs and I have other small animals in New Zealand at that time. So I searched some of the experts who did research about the tourism and the pets, and I found Professor Neil Carr at Otago University. At that time, I really appreciate the support and understanding from my supervisors. They are very flexible and just tell me, if you want to approach other academics to learn from their perspective about the research, do it, be brief, and try to approach these academics by yourself. I did it. So when I sent the email to Professor Neil Carr, surprised me, I received a very quick reply and a very positive. I made my first visit at Otago University in 2015, and I had a couple of meetings with Professor Neil Carr in person. And he even introduced his colleagues at that time to me. And one of the colleagues now still serving as my external research mentor and my active research collaborator, and help me to do research together and teach me how to publish in journal articles. So this is another very important experience in my PhD. Another one is to um, network. I think a network is really important. So for myself, I'm a little bit shy in terms of my personality, but yeah, when I want to approach academics, other colleagues to help me to do research together, I'm not shy anymore. I'm very brave and straightforward. I send the email to say who I am, what I want to do, and what kind of support I want to get from you. And normally I can get a very positive replies, and sometimes even can establish some of the research collaborations together. So I think it's amazing. It's about the senior academics help the juniors academics at that level. Another one is I mentioned interest is the best teacher for me, and it's really important to find your passion in research. So apart from my PhD, so I recognize my PhD as a learning process for me, how to do a research and how to do the research design, data collection, all the process. So eventually I got my PhD title. So I really think the PhD journey helps me a lot. But more importantly, in the 4.5 years, my PhD journey, I found my real passion in research. It's about special interest tourism. This is the major research stream in my life. So my first couple of publications are all fall into this stream. So I think that's quite important. Whenever I did the literature review, I understand some of the junior colleagues all share that, okay, our writing up the literature review sometimes is very hard and mechanical. But when I write up the topics I'm personally really interested in, I enjoy the whole process. I enjoy to getting all the information and to very concise manner in a paper. The whole process is very enjoyable for me. And another one is to have my research identity. At the beginning, as I said, I have no idea what kind of research I'm really interested in. So I start very broadly. I just pick up the things I personally very interested in and try it, and try 1 or 2 papers or projects in the same topic. If I convince myself I like it, I will stick to it in the future. If I think, oh, maybe that's a good idea, but in the process of doing research and writing up a paper, I found, okay, it's maybe not the real passion for me. So I normally decide, okay, we finish this one. I will keep trying and exploring my real passion. I think I do understand for a lot of the junior colleagues, we have pressure of publishing. But for me, my personal experience is once I find my real passion in research, I never care about the pressure of publishing. I really enjoy sharing the stories to colleagues and especially in the public, in general public. It is all about the communication. So this is something about my ECR journey and something from my PhD. Yeah, it's my great pleasure to share something from myself. Thank you.
Wow, there you go. Thanks a lot, Dr. Jun. Obviously, we can hear from him the passion and identity really helped shape his PhD journey and eventually his ECR career. So I'm sure we have some interesting questions to take away from and learning from there. All right, and our second panelist will be talking about addressing this question from a teaching perspective. Is is our senior ECR, Dr. Sean Lee. All right. All right. So, Dr. Sean, please share with us your insights there.
Thanks, Edmund, and good morning, everybody. My name's Sean, obviously, and I am a senior lecturer at Curtin University. I teach, currently I'm teaching just the marketing units. I teach market research and a research project unit. But in the past, I've also taught the tourism units, hospitality units at my school. I'm currently developing an entertainment unit which will run hopefully sometime next semester. But really, if you think about my history in terms of teaching and delivery, I started off at about 15 years old when I joined my first band, and so I played the guitar in a punk rock band back in the late 90s, and it was it was my passion at the time, and I started off doing this. You know how the punk rock bands back in the day, it's all about that poker face, looking as though you don't care, looking as though you you don't even see the audience and you just swept away in the music. And then after a while, I've been playing music for a long time, and it's come to a point where I can do a one-man band. I can actually engage with the crowd. I speak to the crowd. I tell a story with my music, and I do it on campus sometimes. So that the whole idea is that I've always enjoyed performing to some degree. And I was rubbish at the very start. And I think I've gotten a little bit better. And that kind of got me into the whole, PhD program. In fact, I actually enjoyed research, but what I enjoyed a lot more in my degrees was to, actually do the presentations elements of the assignments. And that was, my thing. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why my supervisor actually approached me and said, have you ever considered doing a PhD? Because you can really, really communicate with people. So the way I see it, the PhD program and the ECR experience really is a training ground for you to really develop those presentation skills and the teaching skills. Essentially, teaching is about presentation, but also a lot to do more so with the empathy that you build with people. So I have here a couple of tips, as to how you can use your PhD experience to gradually develop those skills, from becoming that poker face punk rock, rock star, to a, Lady Gaga who really is able to communicate with their audience and engage with them. So the very basis of my teaching philosophy is the whole idea of storytelling. And storytelling is absolutely crucial in being able to engage with people. It's not about delivering content. It's about telling the story about how that content actually applies to real life. It's about creating contextuality around the concepts and theories that you deliver. At the same time, it's something that people can actually identify with, they can actually understand, they can actually see in real life. So I teach market research, which is probably the most boring unit you can, choose to take on. And I chose to take it on because I like to teach research for some reason. I'm also the honors coordinator, and I'm also the, I take on the marketing project unit, which is really a small dissertation. So, it really is important in topics like that to be able to kind of make it a little bit more fun. And you do that by taking people on a journey, taking people on a, on this storytelling journey. In my market research unit, I tell people about, think about this research problem. This guy, and my subject in my unit is this guy called Brian, and Brian is looking for a girlfriend or a partner. And I said, so that's the research problem. There's a gap that needs to be addressed. And then I take them through secondary research. How do you do secondary research? Literature reviews and that sort of stuff. Think about going onto Facebook and stalking the girls that you like or the boys that you like, right? Think about segmentation, as in going onto Tinder and swiping right or swiping left. It's all about bringing context back into that aspect of into that more theoretically dry topics. Now, storytelling takes a bit of practice. You don't get really good at it just like that, just like my performing capabilities. It takes a lot of practice. And the PhD process was very crucial for me because on average, I taught about 7 classes every semester. There will be some supervisors that tell you, don't teach, focus on the PhD. But I do feel that teaching is crucial because that's essentially your job later on. And unless you're able to, establish yourself as a good teacher, win some awards, to help, add credibility to your abilities, you will struggle to find a job later on. It's very rare that you can be a super researcher and get a research fellowship without having to teach for the rest of your life. So really invest in your teaching, practice your teaching, and teaching takes a lot of practice. So teach until you get really good at it. Now, storytelling is one thing, of course, but you have to be authentic in the way that you tell stories. You have to be passionate about the stories that you tell, and so authenticity is the cornerstone behind being a good storyteller. And to be authentic, you need to be able to connect and understand your students. And so there was this TED talk that I watched by this guy called Adam Grant. And he was a organizational psychologist. And he said that there are 3 types of people. There's a giver, a taker, and a matcher. A giver just gives and gives and gives and gives. You think about people like Mother Teresa, they just give their everything to the people that they care for. Then you have the taker, who just takes and takes and takes and takes and takes. And the taker is, the taker basically sucks, and everyone doesn't like them because they're basically a parasite. They leech off everybody else. And then in the middle ground, you have the matcher, and the matcher is really someone who gives and then also knows how to receive and also knows how to set boundaries. And in an organizational context, the giver is the most beneficial to the company because they really turn themselves inside out to contribute. The taker doesn't do much, and in the end, they end up stuffing up. They say something that's really selfish and controversial in public, and then they get into a lot of trouble. But the matcher is someone who's right in between. They're the most stable of employees because they contribute to the company, but at the same time they maintain, their own achievements. They maintain their own well-being. So, in my opinion, being a teacher is, a balancing act between being a giver and a matcher. At some point in time, you might need to be giving a little bit more than you're receiving, and that's the characteristic of a teacher. You really want to give your all to the student, but at the same time, it's also important that you kind of try to match it as well. You try to ensure that you look after yourself by doing your research, all the other admin duty that you need to do to be a well-rounded academic. But at the same time, you also need to match in terms of drawing the boundaries and maintaining your own well-being, because you can't be a great teacher if you're burnt out. You can't be a great teacher if you're frustrated about life. You can't be a great teacher if you are, simply tired or sick. So finding that fine balance between giving a lot at some point and then, learning to match by taking a little bit at some point is crucial in terms of becoming a good teacher. Now, my final point to you is a little bit more meta, a little bit more big picture, but really looking at the whole idea of taking on a little bit more than you need to take on. So one of the things that plagues academia is the academic ego. And the academic ego is a big one because we're Dr. So-and-so and we're Professor So-and-so. And it's very easy to get very caught up in all of that. And you start going, oh, why are these students not getting it? Are they that dumb? Millennials, oh my God. And these are the things that we need to kind of stop ourselves and be very conscious of, because get over yourself. You were at that point at some point in your life where you struggled to understand the concept, where you were overwhelmed with your uni work, where you struggled with the assignments, and you were staying up late doing all sorts of reports. So try to empathize at that point. Now, the second part of this whole get over yourself bit is do the extra work. During the PhD program, during the ECR years, you will be thrown a lot of additional work. Like, as a PhD student, I had to manage Blackboard sites. I had to figure out how to, upload stuff on Blackboard. And it was just part of being a student to somebody. And, but all of that is really important, because writing those additional reports that were not even yours to begin with, writing those, course reviews, doing up all those Blackboard sites and doing up PowerPoint slides for other people. At times, you kind of have to do that because for the rest of your life, you will be a teacher. And it's great that you can train yourself to do that at a very early stage, because then you can seamlessly enter into the job market later on. You can prove to everyone and say, well, I've done all of this, right? So that's basically my perspective on the PhD era. Thank you very much for having me. I've actually had a haircut for all of you. Yep, back to you, Edmund.
Yep. It was great from Dr. Sean. I mean, I didn't know that he used to be a punk rock guitarist. So that explains his hairstyle and the way he walks, if you have not seen him walk. Yep. So I think the takeaway message from Sean is really about teaching is really part of your PhD and ECR experience, because in your future academic career, all right, you will have to teach at some point in time. So lots of good advices from Sean. And our third ECR panelist is Isabella Ye, or should I say Dr. Ye, who is awaiting graduation. Yep. And she's going to be sharing us from her perspective of the service and how it actually develops the PhD ECR experience. So, Isabella.
Thanks, Edmund. Hello, everyone. My name is Isabella. Unlike other panelists, I'm only very fresh out of the PhD oven and recently started working as a lecturer at the University of Queensland. So before I started my PhD, I worked as a guest relations manager at the Hilton Hotel for several years. So it's all about serving and customer service. So I guess service compared to research and teaching is not as concrete. There are many different activities or types of service roles that you can get involved. So during my PhD, I was part of many different types of service activities. Some of those were teaching related. So like working as a subject coordinator, I was a moderator for the UQ massive online courses for tourism management and also volunteering at UQ Open Day. Some of them were research related. So things like being a journal or conference reviewer, helping organize HDR student research bootcamp, and others are purely service activities. So I was serving on the UQ Business School HDR student committee. And then I was served as the COSI PhD student rep last year. I've also participated in the National Innovation Games as a challenger last year and applied my research skills to help small businesses recover from 2020 Australian bushfire. June and Sean has covered some really fantastic insights into research and the teaching component. And I think, in my opinion, service is a cherry on the top of your research and teaching experiences as a PhD student, because it strengthens and publicizes your ability in research and teaching, as well as you as a human being. More importantly, service roles can also open doors to new opportunities and broaden your networks, both personal as well as professional. Speaking from my own experiences, there are 3 aspects where service activities enrich my PhD journey that I would like to share with you today. The first one is undertaking a service role offers a great opportunity to develop your soft skills. So things like your interpersonal skills, leadership, communication, and also time management. Many of those soft skills are transferable and can be very critical in your job seeking. For example, me working as a course coordinator definitely develops leadership skills and show me the administration side of teaching. It also trains me how to communicate and manage conflicts with different type of audiences, with students, colleagues, and also professional staff within the school. Quite similar during my time as the COSI PhD rep, my involvement in organizing the mid-year and annual conference definitely leveled up my confidence and more importantly, how to manage my time properly to fit in my PhD and teaching and other aspects. The second component is friendship. So partaking in service activities expands your personal and professional network. You get to know new friends beyond your school, your faculty, and even university. These people you meet become your support group and make your PhD journey less lonely. I think this particularly helped me during the COVID times as it created that virtual sense of togetherness, even though you are alone. You can consider doing so by volunteering on a student committee or helping organize HDR events. Things like this allow you to get to know your colleagues or professors or even the deans of your research in a more organic and informal way. So it opens door to increase your networking abilities as well. The third point is more a personal note. Involvement in service activities provided me a different kind of fulfillment that eases the struggle with PhD. I'm sure many of you can probably relate to this. Quite often, writing your thesis, analyzing the huge bulk of data, waiting for your supervisor's comments seems to be a never-ending worrying loop. We worry about our research may not be impactful, worry whether our analysis was correct, worry if we'll ever find a job, or even worry about finance while at the same time being very homesick. This is where service activity can actually intercept that worrying loop by shifting your focus and putting a positive spin on things. You can consider helping out at the University Open Day, for example, talking to colleagues that you barely really meet, or helping students generally make you feel good. You also get to know the university program better, which help with the teaching aspects. Plus, you get to explore all sorts of university branded merchandise that you never know existed before. Service activity, I think, also extend to going beyond your research studies and help businesses and communities. Last year, I was pretty much in my thesis writing mode where I questioned my research topic daily. What on earth was I doing? And then this event come along. It's called National Innovation Game here in Australia. It's very similar to a hackathon that brought together government, small businesses, and students to create solutions for bushfire recovery. So I thought I should give it a go. During the game, our team designed and pitched a story-based digital interpretation guide that won the first prize and a startup fund of 10,000 Australian dollars for the business that we were working with. So that moment winning this prize really gives a meaningful purpose to my own research topic, where I start to realize that all these efforts and time spent reading, thinking, and writing can actually help someone out there. So if you can, actively looking for opportunities like this and get involved. So to sum up, undertaking service roles, developed my soft skills, built friendship, and provided a sense of fulfillment and meaningful purpose during my PhD journey. Although I do admit that there were challenging times where it's very difficult to juggle so many things. So I suppose it is important for you to prioritize your tasks, what's more important, know when to stop when it's getting too much, and also try not to do everything at the same time. So that's my story, and thank you for having me.
Yep. Well said, Isabella. Yep. I think I mean it's very important. I mean, you mentioned the cherry on top of the icing on the cake. I think that's a very good analogy because you know I look at service in terms of understanding the back of house and understanding what goes on in the engine room of the unit. So well said. All right. So well done to the ECRs. I'm sure they must be very nervous when they were sharing their tips alongside the renowned senior academics. Yep. Most of them actually went over their time limit, but I'm trying to get them back. All right. We move on now to our second question. And for the second question, we have our senior academics who have been there, done that. You know, they've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly side of academia. Yep, and we'll get them to share their insights on this second question. What is the most important attribute in terms of involvement in research, teaching, and service that can enhance career prospects of ECRs and PhD scholars? So without further ado, let's get some tips from our very first senior academic, Professor Sarah Donicha. Sarah?
Thanks, Edmund. Yep. I'll help you save some time. I've been enjoying the presentations by the ECRs, so it's all my talk is almost the response to the ECRs because I thought some of the concepts were really interesting. And I will also immediately start arguing with the question you asked, Edmund, because I actually think it's the opposite question. I think in the really early career stages as a PhD and as an ECR, too many people now, and I'm not blaming anyone because it's a very difficult time to be an ECR, right? The pressures are unbelievable. I mean, I don't think I would have survived it, honestly, if I would be an ECR today. But I actually think because of the pressure and because we get so distracted with silly KPIs, we don't ask ourselves enough if we want the job, right? So we always frame it as, does the job want me? Will I find the job? What do I need to do to get into that job? And we don't ask, is that actually the job I want? And so I want to reflect on the things you said and just summarize and pick up the things I really like. So I love Sean's concept of typology. And I actually think typologies are really interesting, or segments if you want, when you ask the question whether you are going to have a great time doing this for 40 years, right? And to me, the typology is, do you love your job or do you hate it? It's really basic, right? But I go to work, no kidding. I go to work every day, really excited, right? I just really do like what I do. And I see a lot of people around me are the same. And I see a lot of people who drag themselves to work every day, even PhD students. But if you find that that's the kind of feeling you have in the morning, then I think you really need to ask yourself whether that's going to work. Because, you know, basically from the start, you've got a disadvantage. If you're not loving it, you're always pushing against the brick wall. Eh? The second segment would be, are you a problem finder or a problem solver, right? I see a lot of we all think as academics, oh, I found an interesting problem. But unfortunately, that's not our business, right? Our business is to solve problems. So if you're the type who thinks it's an achievement to find the problem, you need to think again, right? You're not going to be successful. There won't be any applause and acknowledgement for finding problems. You've got to solve them. Are you an 80% person or are you a 100% person? I'm a big believer that whatever you spend 80% on is a waste of your 80%. You've got to do it 100%. And in research, that's just really true, right? You cannot do a piece of research on 80% quality or 80% good data. It's got to be 100%. So I think that's really important to ask yourself, is that kind of the thing you want to be or the person you want to be? I love the concept of ego, right? Saying that we all have great egos. It's a great conversation. We could just talk about this for an hour. But I again think there's two segments. I think there's people driven by ego and there's people driven by the research challenge. And you can tell immediately who's who when you talk to them, right? And again, if you think about yourself and analyze, am I driven by ego or the research challenge? I think if you're ego driven, this is a very tough career because you all know the experience, right? I describe academia as a constant oscillation between feeling like the smartest person in the world and the dumbest person in the world. Because every time you get rejected, you think, oh my God, you know, like I'm so dumb. And then you win something, you get a paper and you think, yes, I'm the best. So if ego is what you're feeding off, that's going to be really hard because it's a real roller coaster, right? If, however, ego is just not an issue because you're all the time focused on your next research question, because you're passionate about it, because you're excited, you're fired up about it, well, then actually ego doesn't matter. And then actually the rejection doesn't matter, right? Because the rejection is just, you never did it in the first place for the paper. You did it for the curiosity and the excitement. So they reject it, who cares? You send it somewhere else, you pursue your next research question. So my advice would be to take that time you have as an ECR, especially as a PhD student, to really immerse yourself, to not spread yourself too thin, and to really ask the question for yourself, if that's a career you're going to enjoy for 40 years. Because if you're not, then now's the time to quit, all right? Then every extra year you spend suffering is not a good investment. What else did I want to say? One more thing. Yes, focus, don't spread. Yeah, I'm going to finish by saying, because I hope we will still have time to take some questions. That's always the most fun, right? To answer some questions. So, you know, my ultimate advice to everyone would be to keep in mind that academia, whether you're teaching, research, both, service, doesn't matter which form or shape. It's not a strategy game. Yeah, all these KPIs, they try to tell us that we need to have a strategy. We need to publish and we need to have high citations and we need to network, right? I'm the worst networker on the planet and it's never hurt me, all right? So I don't believe in that. I don't think this is a strategy game. I think it's a calling, and calling sounds a bit kind of very saint, right? But I Googled it just now. And calling means a strong urge towards a particular way of life or career. And you know what? That totally describes me, right? I have a strong urge for what I do every day. And I think just reflecting upon whether that's how you feel about it might be really worthwhile in these early career stages. Thank you.
There you go. I mean, well said, Sarah. I think some of those tips that you've given really resonates with everyone, especially with me, myself as well. Yeah. All right, let's move on. I mean, I'm just looking at the time. We only have about 11 more minutes to go. So, so perhaps if the next two speakers could kind of tone it down to somewhere about 4 to 5 minutes max. Yeah, and we'll see how we go then. All right. And the next panelist we have is one of our senior academics, Professor Karen Smith. We'll be talking about the teaching perspective. Here you go, Karen.
Kia ora koutou, everyone, and good afternoon, because in New Zealand, we're already halfway through the afternoon. I'm here in Victoria University of Wellington, and it's lovely to be joining you today. As Ben listened to the speakers, I sat and probably mistakenly worked out that it's 25 years since I taught my first class as a first-year PhD student, and was thinking about kind of actually reflecting back that for the certainly whole of my PhD, and actually the first couple of years of being a lecturer in tourism management in the UK, I often went into my teaching and I was kind of physically kind of not sick, but nervous before I went into my teaching. And now I look back and think, you know, teaching is my passion. I love teaching. I love supporting people who are teaching, which is why I've ended up in a service role as an associate dean, learning and teaching. But actually what Sarah was saying about see if you enjoy this career was so important in the early stages. It doesn't mean you have to love it instantly, but you need to work out kind of where these different aspects of an academic role actually sit, and see if you do have that passion and authenticity that Sean was talking about. All right, so getting down to it, what's kind of things that I think are really important here? So I'll focus on two. The first is bearing in mind the range of pressures that you have to complete your PhD, which needs to be your priority, and sort of the other aspects of being an ECR. Actually, if you are looking for a sort of career in this area, getting experience is the baseline. So where do you start? Well, you might do a guest lecture for your supervisor. You might be a tutor or pick up some marking. You might progress into sessional lecturing and maybe even into sort of course management whilst you're doing your PhD. It almost doesn't matter what it is, but it's actually kind of building experience to actually test out the role, develop your skills, and understand what you want to do in terms of building on those. I feel actually almost the topics you're teaching at this point in your career are less important than building that experience. But I'd also suggest you can think more broadly, and Erica might touch on this as well, but it's often service roles that actually might feed into this as well. If you're a coach of a football team at of local kids, you're actually teaching and you're coaching and you're mentoring. So thinking about teaching holistically, I think, is important. Second point is that if this is the thing for you, start building up evidence and reflection. So you're building what we might sort of more formally call a teaching portfolio, but it doesn't have to be initially as formal as that. But what I'm encouraging you to do from very early on is to essentially document your teaching practice and really engage and use professional development. So most universities will have sort of a Centre for Academic Development or Teaching Development. If they've got some sessions on offer, it's a great support to actually engage early and take those teaching opportunities. Seek feedback and record it. So if somebody sends you a nice email, whether or not that's a student that you helped with a question or a staff member who's thanking you for doing something, a colleague of mine talks about their sunshine file. I call it my good news file. Store it. Just put it there. Sometimes when you're having a bad day, it's worth pulling out and having a look at it and somebody liked it, what you were doing. But again, it also starts to build that evidence that if you're talking about your teaching, you can start to draw on as well. If you have the opportunity to engage in formal evaluations, whether or not that's formally through your university or it's kind of a quick feedback that you take in the class, again, do that and think about the results. Think about what you've learned from getting that feedback. How have you improved? As you build more experience, you'll build more topics, you'll work out where your expertise is. But actually, initially, it's just about learning from what you do. And it doesn't matter if it sometimes goes badly. I mean, hopefully your students still have a good outcome. But if you can learn from those experiences, that's really important. And start to think about kind of where you can offer something. You know, in the past year in particular, often it's been our younger academics and our PhD students who've been at the forefront of the change in modes of delivery that many of us are experiencing. So use those kind of skills and knowledge that you have. And then finally, when I'm looking at recruitment and I'm looking at supporting colleagues who are going for promotion and things, for me in the teaching space, flexibility is really important. Actually, a good teacher is able to actually change and isn't stuck in a rut. They're able to try new things. They're able to take on new challenges. And actually, that's something you can think of right from the beginning as well. So I'm going to finish by taking you back to Sean and say, you know, I loved when he talked about this idea of what's your passion, what's your authenticity, but invest in your teaching if that's the direction you want to go. Kia ora, everyone.
Yeah, well done. Thanks a lot, Karen. I think the teaching portfolio is so important. It's pretty much like what you have done to prove yourself that you are a good teacher to some extent. Yeah. So well said. So the last speaker that you have, and no pressure to our Pro Vice Chancellor Erica Wilson, but you have about sort of 3 to 4 minutes to wrap this up. Though. Here you go.
Well, how about we make it 1 minute and then we'll have time for questions. Sarah's giving me the thumbs up. look, I've never been called a service expert before, so I quite like this one. But, you know, it's quite a fitting analogy because often the role of the service expert, and in what I do, is to hear what other people have to say, to let other people ask the questions, and then to, you know, provide a way forward and provide leadership. So I'm very happy to be very brief and hear what our participants have to say. So look, I guess the core question was, what is the most important attribute? And I've got 3, and I'm just going to say them very quickly, because most of the things I was going to say have been very aptly picked up by the other speakers today. And I really do like your point, Isabella, about learning the soft skills. I think I'm still learning that myself, but it really is an important skill. So for me, it's about being able to step up and step outside of your comfort zone, outside of your disciplinary area, and take on any opportunities that arise. Of course, as others say, within reason. This isn't about being a slave or proving that you're perfect at everything, but really finding what you're good at. And, you know, you might be thinking, well, what does service have to do with the PhD? Might be a bit more evident in an ECR role, but if I look back now, which I've been kind of doing as I've been sitting here, I can see now, even though there didn't seem to be a pattern at the time, that I was taking on sort of what you would call service or academic citizenship roles very early on, that probably started in my, or did start in my PhD. And one of my very early service professional roles was as secretary of CALFI way back in my 20s. And someone literally had to put my hand up for that. I just didn't think I had time. So there you go. The second thing is collegiality. And this isn't about being everybody's friend, but that you have to be, if you want to go into sort of leadership or service type roles, you do have to step outside of your own boxes and make sure that you're, you know, you're collegial, and that sometimes that means being objective and putting your own views to the side as you hear what everybody else has to say. And the last thing is really an openness to opportunity, which kind of links to my first point anyway. But if you're looking, those around you, your colleagues and your senior staff and academics, are looking around to who they might hire in their department or school, I can tell you they'll be looking at, well, what would they like as a PhD or an ECR? What are they good team players? Are they collegial? Will they step up and you know, take on some of these tasks? So I might leave it there, and there's other things to say, but I think they've all been said. So I'll leave it there, Edmund. Thank you. Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Right. Thanks a lot, Erica. All right. So, let's, I guess maybe we can have time for a couple of questions, I hope. Yep. And I do apologize to Ina, who's running the next session, the mentoring session. We might be a few minutes late for that, but so I have a very captured audience and I don't want to lose you guys. So
very quick ones.
Yeah, quick ones. I'm just going through the questions, and we have one question from, can I read the name? Yes, I'll read your name. Yep, so it's from Aaron Tam, yep, from University of Sunshine Coast. So his question is, are there suggestions for how PhDs or ECRs should prepare themselves to be physically mobile, to move internationally to different regions to take up job opportunities? So I think this is a very tricky question given the COVID situation, but yeah, so it's about, should academics still think about moving around different countries, states, and so on yes.
I'm happy to just quickly jump in there. I haven't moved, and I'm at a regional university. Yeah, and obviously right now no one can move much of anywhere, but for me, the way I've been able to, as Sarah says, stay motivated and energetic is not by doing the same thing every day, but by taking on these other roles. So I think I would have died of boredom if I just turned out papers and taught the same thing for 20 years. So for me, I've been able to job craft is a term I kind of use, to take on these different roles. And that's kind of how I've landed in this this opportunity at the moment. So there's two ways to do it. It's not the way that I've done it, but you can move for every opportunity, or you can find opportunities within your institution, depending on your life circumstances. So the tricky one.
All right, fair enough. And we have one last question. And there was no name for this, but if you could turn back time, yeah, what would you have done differently in your early career? Any regrets and why? Anyone interested to, any
Sure.
panelists? Oh, Sarah, there
I'll
you go.
go for it. I have no regrets whatsoever. And you will be amused. I actually spent the whole 8 years after my PhD. Nobody told me I had to publish. I'm not kidding you. So I was just pottering around doing cool stuff. And then one day I went to my supervisor. I said, do I need to publish? And he said, yes. And I said, well, is there? And then he explained to me journals. And I think that is an opportunity that has been so precious and that you ECRs now are missing. And I feel really sad for you. So no, I think now you're not given that freedom, but you've got to fight for it, right? You have got to find the freedom to fight what you're passionate about and to potter around a bit and have some deep thought rather than just chase the next KPI.
There you go. Well said. Yeah. All right. So look, I mean, keep your questions coming in, and what we'll do is at the end of the session, we actually collate all the questions and we will try to address them with the panelists, and we'll get back to you then, okay? All right, so in the spirit of time, we will have to now conclude the panel session. So please join me in thanking our panel members for their significant insights and entertaining discussions. Yep, and of course, thank you to delegates for being so awesome as well. We wish you all the best in your PhD and ECR journey. Yep, and as the panelists have said, don't give up. Love your job. All right, and be true to yourself. All right, so I'm not going to pass on to Dr. Ina Reichenberg to brief you on the next mentoring sessions.
Thanks so much, Edmund, and thank you to all the panelists. I think there was a great start to our PhD ECR workshop for CORTHI 2021. All attendees should have received an email and have an appointment in their calendar for their individual mentoring sessions. Mentors are already emailing me, telling me that they're here, that they're waiting. So please go back to your calendar, click your individual Zoom link and join. And once 3 o'clock hits, please do come back to events for our final mindfulness session, which I think we'll all need. If you haven't received a mentoring invitation, my email is right here on the slide. So pop me a quick note and I will see what happened and will send you your link as soon as I possibly humanly can. And I hope you'll enjoy it. And it'll also be a great opportunity to figure out what the information you got in the panel means for you, yourself, and your specific context. So I hope you can make lots of great use of it. I hope you'll enjoy, and thanks so much. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the day in the next session. Thank you.
Ina and Guy.